Welcome to the Critical Media Studies Podcast. We're your hosts, Mike Rapici
and Barry Fall.
Dr. Rapici, how are you this evening? I'm doing fine. How are
Barry,
you?
I got to tell you, and those of you listening, unfortunately can't see this, you are doing more than fine, Barry, because you are wearing the best looking shirt I have seen. I'm well,
great.
thank you. Barry is kitted out in a red Guayavera, and we are ready to talk about Mark Fisher again.
Yes, we are. We're just going to go right to it. We did a lot of scene setting, table setting last episode. I'm going to keep that to a minimum and just point our dear listeners to the previous episode. And so I'll keep the preamble very short. Mark Fisher, academic, cultural theorist, music theorist, kind of blended music theory, popular music, cultural criticism with cultural criticism and also media theory from a particular Marxist angle. Kind of had a divergent moment in 2013 when he, with the blog entry Exiting the Vampire Castle, where he castigated basically Marxist leftist academics online and their performative politics. If you want to know more details about that, listen to our last episode where we talk about the preamble and gave a lot of historical context for Fisher in this particular blog. But what we're going to do in this episode is we're going to try to be pithy, or CMS. We're going to try for pith and concision. And what is the Greek word? Laconic. My favorite Greek word, laconic. We're going to try to be pithy, laconic, and compressed and concise, and go immediately to our mission. We set ourselves a mission in the end of the last episode that we were going to talk specifically about the 5 rules of the Vampire Castle. And the Vampire Castle, just this little bit of prelude, and we really will be off to the races. The Vampire's Castle is his not very cheery or meant to be complimentary name for the online, like these online forums where there is performative, where there's a lot of posturing, according to Fisher. A lot of posturing and a lot of online performative moralism. What we would now call, but this was written in 2013, so I don't think we had the term virtue signaling, but that's kind of what he's talking about and complaining about, and what he says happens inside of the Vampire's Castle. So, Dr. Rapici, I'm just going to read one little paragraph, and then we'll get into the section called Inside the Vampire's Castle and talk about the 5 laws. Here's the section I'll read, kind of the summary of his wind-up for the 5 laws, for the articulation of the 5 laws. And here, Mark Fisher writes the following. Where to go from here? It is first of all necessary to identify, this is what's going to happen with the 5 laws. It is first of all necessary to identify the features of the discourses and the desires which have led us to the grim and demoralizing past, where class has disappeared. We'll have, I guess, a short diversion here, because this is the major, I suppose, complaint, I think, right, Michael?
Mm-hmm.
This is the major complaint that he lobbies, that in the discourse, the allowable discourse within the vampire, what he calls the Vampire Castle, moralism trumps political activism, but also trumps or evacuates, I guess we can never use trumps as a verb, kind of evacuates the articulation of working class interests and desires, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't mean to sound pedantic. I don't know so much that it trumps or supersedes so much as I think that what he's saying, or as I understand it, is that moralism has become, it fills in for it. That's part of the performative nature. Is it's hard to be a good Marxist without class, right? And basically what he and the class struggle, and what he is arguing here, as I read him, is that rather than actually engaging with, the sort of various aspects of class struggle as it exists, we've become sort of performative moralists.
Well, if silly Dr. Falk had finished reading the sentence before I went on my meaningless digression, then you wouldn't have to stage your intervention. So let me just read the sentence.
Read
Where
on, sir.
class has disappeared and moralism is everywhere, where solidarity is impossible, but guilt and fear are omnipresent. Well, maybe here is a more purposeful diversion, a very short
Sure.
one. Partly because moralism has replaced
Class.
these other concerns. Yeah, partly because of that. That's one of the things that allows in this dynamic of guilt and fear. And we talked about in the last episode that
Yeah.
there's a way in which, part of what's happening in the vampire's castle, and maybe this could be a criticism of Mark Fisher if one wants to levy it, is that maybe he's too quick to realize, yeah, if there's really truly moralism, and if there's really and truly guilt and fear, then you probably have a lot of anxious people. You probably have people who may be right to be anxious because they're worried about their position within the vampire castle, because it is about hierarchy.
I
He
think that's
maybe forgets that a little bit.
well. There's two things I think at stake in this, and I think they're inexorably connected here. The thing that doesn't get articulated here, and I don't know that it could, because again, this is 2013, is that the environment that Fisher is describing and deriding is a very different place with very different rules, because the very structure of online discourse is profoundly different and operates under a completely different set of rules than the in-person, conferences, say, or the form of academic dialogue shifts when it goes online. It's disembodied, and that's going to create. I wouldn't say it's going to create, but it certainly lays the groundwork for the sort of rules of engagement and the way that discourse is done. And I think that's what that's really
Right.
like. It's funny almost looking at this. What is it? I guess 13 years on, right? A lot has happened when we go through and we engage these 5 rules that he's talking about. I think there's going to be a a tendency, or a temptation, maybe I should say, to sort of look at this and say, well, obviously, I mean, these seem fairly obvious now, but when he's writing in 13, this is a massive shift in the way that discourse is conducted.
Well, that's very good point. That's a very good point. Let me finish reading the sentence
Yeah,
and
yeah.
get to the laws. And not because we are terrorized by the right, these problems aren't happening because we are terrorized by the right, but because we have allowed bourgeois modes of subjectivity, including this moralism, to contaminate our movement. I think there are 2 libidinal discursive configurations which have brought this situation about. They call themselves left wing, but as the Brand episode, he refers to
Russell Brand.
Russell Brand in the first part of this in 2013, and Russell Brand, who was much more clearly aligned with populist left, I suppose, at that point. There are many ways a sign of the left, defined as an agent in class struggle, has all but disappeared. Okay, so that's his complaint. Are you ready, Dr.
And eager,
for
Dr. Falk,
for me to read the first law? I'm going to read the first law. I'm not going to interrupt myself this time and go on expeditions. No, I am not. I'm going to read the first law. And then please pay attention, dear listeners, and please pay attention, Dr. Rapici, most of all, Dr. Rapici, because there's going to be a moment of silence after I read the first law. And you're going to comment. I'm going to expect you to share your comments. So we're ready? Let's do it. Let's do it. First law of the vampire's castle is individualize. So we're going to evaluate these laws. All right. Individualize and privatize everything. While in theory, It claims to be, and it, I suppose, the Vampire's Castle, which is leftist online discourse, right, claims to be in favor of structural critique. In practice, it never focuses on anything except individual behavior. You have to sort of talk about individual behavior if you're going to get moralistic, right? Some of these working class types are not terribly well brought up. It can be very rude at times. Remember, condemning individuals is always, this is the first law, condemning individuals is always more important than paying attention to impersonal structures. The VC, Vampire's Castle, as dupe servants of the ruling class, does the opposite. It pays lip service to solidarity and collectivity, while always acting as if the individualist categories imposed by power really hold. Because they are petty bourgeois to the core. You can understand why people are getting upset with this, right? Because they are petty bourgeois to the core. Them's fighting words. The members of the Vampire's Castle are intensely competitive. But this is repressed in the passive-aggressive manner typical of the bourgeoisie. What holds them together is not solidarity, but mutual fear. The fear that they will be the next one to be outed, exposed, condemned. Dr. Rapici, have a first crack at this, and I have comments as well.
Yeah. So I think that's a fairly meaty paragraph. So let's cherry pick it for a second.
It is.
Okay, so individualize and privatize everything. And obviously the snark that Fisher is sort of dealing in here is fairly thick, right?
Right.
Claims to be favor of structural critique. In practice, it never focuses on anything except individual behavior. Remember, condemning individuals is always more important than paying attention to impersonal structures, right? So here, right, we're talking about the tendency I guess the tendency of the Vampire Castle to shift away from its ideal purpose, right, to attack or address structural issues that would define and determine some of the class inequalities and struggles, and rather to focus on individual behavior. Right. This is him basically calling about the quasi-cannibalistic aspect of the Vampire Castle. So what gets me, right, this last line here, what holds them together is not solidarity, which is what you would expect.
Oh, I didn't read that, did I? I didn't read that.
No, you did. What, right? Okay. Council are intensely competitive, but is the repressed in the passive-aggressive manner typical of the bourgeoisie. What holds them together is not solidarity, which is what you would expect in class struggle, right? Rather, mutual fear, the fear that they will be the next one to be outed, exposed, condemned. So what I'm reading here, right, is that what these online discourses that have come together to comprise the Vampire Castle, what they've done is they have created an environment that is profoundly alienating. And in that alienation, we survive by attacking the individuals as opposed to attending to the actual structural issues at hand. Right. Obviously, the low-hanging fruit is to say that this is a sort of mirror effect of the anonymity or the disembodied nature, I guess we would say, of online discourse, right? That we're no longer sort of protected by or defined by the structures from which we operate, right? Like, I mean, we talked about this with Althusser, right? The idea about the university as being, one of the state apparatuses, but still that in that RSA nature, it still defines us and gives us a home base from which to operate. Online, you're kind of just a floating island. Even if you are affiliated, it's still, this is the work of individuals at this point. And so I'm understanding that to be the fear. Like, you are not protected institutionally anymore. Now this is all just, name, comment, name, comment, name, comment. And if you speak too loudly, you're going to get smacked. And there's a lot of people, everybody's looking to smack somebody.
Don't have much to add to that. I think that's definitely the dynamic that he's criticizing. You know, do you want to move to the second one, or I
Unless you had
probably could?
something pithy to add to the first one. As I said, I feel like this is sort of a strange project at this point because so much of this feels
Yeah,
uh, common in 2026.
I gotcha. I gotcha. And I'm worried that my question will be characteristically not pithy, but I'll try and keep it pithy. And if it gets too unpithy, we're going to move to F and second law really quickly. So I'll
Let's
let you
go.
be the judge on this. But um, you were kind of bringing it up
Oh, it can be my
for my
fault.
second question, huh?
It can be my fault. That's fine.
No, 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 no. I don't mean that. But I'm just saying your last comment. Your last comment is kind of related to the second question that I was barely my question, which I was repressing, and now I'm unleashing, and here it is. When I read this aloud, Michael, I realized that, as you said, he's first and foremost talking about maybe it is academics, but it's his first and foremost concern is to address the new emerging, as you pointed out,
Mm-hmm.
the emerging form of academic online culture. So talking about it as academic culture, he certainly didn't think he was doing that. His idea was that his criticism is aimed, and he makes it very clear in the preamble that he's criticizing a emerging form of online culture where moral judgments have a new kind of currency. Okay, so how about this? I think my question isn't a question. I'm just going to make it as a remark, and maybe I'm going to tag it as a remark, and then maybe there's going to be another way where I can return to this comment. So we'll put a pin. I'm going to say it, and we're going to put a pin in it. Nonetheless, even though he says he's talking about online culture, when I read that last sentence, and we'll do it again, you read it, but I'm going to read it again. What holds them together is not solidarity, but mutual fear. The fear that they will be the next one to be outed, exposed, condemned. I know we're talking about people who are online and commenting online, but I can't help but feel that that is a description of, you brought up, and I don't remember who brought it up. I know we discussed the graduate seminar
Yeah.
in our last episode.
Yep.
And I couldn't help but think that that description is a description of the culture of the graduate seminar as much as it is about emerging. I don't know what to
Well,
make of that. He
so,
is saying he wants to say something online, and you talked about he wants to characterize online culture. You said that. You're right about that. And I worry that I'm
well,
just seeing so much of the academy culture in here, in that thing.
let's pause on this for a second though, because I think there's a couple interesting things to tease out here, right? First of all, I think it's important to note that this idea, individualize, privatize everything, okay? The idea that we are shifting our focus in our dialogue away from the larger structural issues, which do take solidarity to address, right? You have to approach
Yeah,
those
right.
as a collective, to this more individualized focus. This idea, right? And then the last line here, what holds them together is not solidarity, but mutual fear of being the next one out, exposed, condemned. This is the idea that gives the other four laws that laws 2 through 5. This informs all of those. But there's an interesting thing to think about here. We talked last time about this idea of sort of sitting and waiting to pounce, and the fear of being the target of a pounce, yet the need to say something, right? And there's this tension about the need to say something, but finding a place or an opportunity to say something that does not make you a target, that somehow asserts your right to be in the room or in the discussion as one of the hallmarks of the graduate classroom. It's funny to think about the fact that I think I would contend that what we've seen is that these laws, this shift in discourse that he's identifying in 2013, which is the result of a move online, I think we're seeing the digital discourse that he is talking about in 2013
in 2026, right?
has become
The
one
norm
of
for
the
yeah,
one of the
yeah,
ways that we just
yeah,
have normalized behavior
yeah,
in 2026,
yeah,
right? I was, I guess I'm going to say, I'm happy to say that I was in the graduate classroom pre 2013. It wasn't like this. It was a much more communal experience, right? If you look at it now, it has become much more aggressive. It has become, and I think that it's not so much aggressive in terms of hostile necessarily, but kind of aggressive in the sense that we have to fight. We feel like we have to fight for our right to be. Like, I belong in this chair. And I think that a lot of these, and I think it's because we spend so much time in these online communities and environments where that has become the normal mode of discussion, that we've now brought what was a sort of, in Fisher's opinion, a, sort of what, new, unsavory type of discourse has been normalized. And now it's come back around. So I think we can, I think that's enough sort of
That's enough for now. Let's
groundwork to
well,
talk about the next
I'm very
ones.
happy about the way you think you contributed and expanded on that idea very nicely there. So I think we're in a great position to pivot.
Right, because the second law,
yeah,
the second law, he says, second law of the Vampire's Castle is to make thought and action appear very, very difficult. There must be no lightness and certainly no humor. Humor isn't serious by definition, right? Thought is hard work for people with posh voices and furrowed brows.
So
Where there
that's
is confidence, introduce skepticism. Say, don't be hasty. We have to think more deeply about this. Remember, having convictions is oppressive and might lead to gulags.
Interesting. Make thought and action appear very difficult.
No, very, very,
Very
difficult. We got a double very right there.
Well, Michael, do you think this is still appropriate? Do you think this is still apropos? Is there a tendency to make actual well, first off, let me enlist your help in understanding for myself. What's the purpose? What's the real purpose of making thought and action appear very, very difficult? Is it to sort of, as I understand it, it's a kind of self-aggrandizing gesture that
Absolutely.
right? That
But it's also a hedging device. Right? We have to think about it. I might be wrong. I'm not so sure. Slow down. I have to consider what you said. Because there's probably something wrong with it, right? I think this is, as I said earlier, this is an extension of the first law.
Of the first one. So there's a way of keeping everyone kind of on their guard, right? On their guard. It's like there can't be automatic agreement or solidarity. In fact, the default position is, well, maybe you're wrong. Maybe you're still wrong, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. Shall we go to the third law? Do you want to read the third law? You were doing a very good job with the second
law. Thank you. The third law of the Vampire's Castle is propagate as much guilt as you can. The more guilt, the better. People must feel bad. It is a sign that they understand the gravity of things. It's okay to be class privileged. If you feel guilty about privilege and make others in a subordinate class position to you feel guilty too. You do some good works for the poor, right? I mean, this is wonderful. It reads like a combination of The Onion and a Mad Lib. Right. So again, right? We have to make sure that the air of oppression reaches everybody. You have to feel guilty, because if you don't feel guilty, then you are the problem and you should feel guilty.
So how do you signal your guilt? You signal, is he alluding to the constant reference to sort of the mandatory recourse to saying that one is privileged as soon as one makes a comment? I'm trying to think
I
about what.
think, well, so again, I think so, I had mentioned, and again, I could be totally off base. So let me do my hedging to make sure that I'm appropriately filling my chair here.
Please.
Okay. So if the second law says, hey, thought and action have to be difficult.
Right.
We have to, first of all, we have to individualize, privatize, essentialize
Right.
everything. Well, actually, we're going to essentialize in just a minute here, right? But we have to make things appear very difficult. It's guilt is important, right? Like people have to be guilty. You have to have a target. There has to be somebody who has done something wrong. And again, this whole, rule 3 is obviously 100% snark, but he says it's okay to be classed privilege. If you feel guilty about privilege, you have to signal your guilt for the privilege, right? But you have to make others in a position subordinate to you feel guilty as well. In other words, you don't have to actually give up your spot. You just have to do your necessary virtue signaling, say, I know I'm a white man and therefore blah, blah, blah. However, and then, or, it doesn't have to be white males. It can be any privileged group, right? But then you have to include others, because otherwise what happens is you end up cutting yourself off at the knees, and that's not going to do, because then we don't get to keep our privilege.
No, right. So virtue signaling as a way of denying and simultaneously affirming, and in fact,
elevating,
exactly. Elevating and adding on to our privilege. Okay.
And that's the idea, right? Because again, at the base of all of this is the fear that we will be outed. And the only way around the fear that we will be outed is to rise above that, to make yourself better.
Right.
That was probably the least articulate thing I'll say today. That was good.
No. But I think we're ready to move to the fourth law. Do you want me to read, or do you want to read?
Fourth law? Go for it.
The fourth law of the vampire's castle is essentialize. While fluidity of identity, plurality, and multiplicity are always claimed on behalf of VC members, partly to cover up their own invariably wealthy, privileged, or bourgeois assimilationist background, the enemy is always to be essentialized. Since the desires animating the VC are in large part priest desires, moralistic desires, to excommunicate and condemn, there has to be a strong distinction between good and evil, with the latter essentialized. Notice the tactics. X has made a remark, has behaved in a particular way. These remarks, this behavior might be construed as transphobic, sexist, etc. But it's the next move, which is the kicker. X then becomes defined as a transphobe, sexist, etc. Their whole identity becomes defined by one ill-judged remark or behavioral slip. Once the VC has mastered its witch hunt, the victim the lighting is not so good in this part of the vampire castle. Sorry, folks. I'm sorry. Failing.
I just did it. We just lived that up. I waited for my moment. You made your slip, and I hammered it.
That's it. And I'm trying to get desperately through humor.
That's it.
I'm trying
That's
to reassemble my privilege. Let's do it.
God, I feel
once
terrible.
the VC has mustered its witch hunt, the victim, often from a working class background and not schooled in the passive aggressive etiquette of the bourgeois, can reliably be goaded into losing their temper, further securing their position as pariah, latest to be consumed in feeding frenzy.
Dude,
now,
it is. It is no surprise he pissed everybody off with this.
Yeah, but no, not at all.
This one's wonderful.
Well, tell me why you think it's wonderful. I want to hear that. I want to say a quick thing.
Yeah.
When I read the first law, I was thinking, wow, a lot of this just strikes me as an indictment of the academic culture that Fisher was participating in, and I guess an indictment of online culture. But this fourth law, this idea of you got one strike and you're out,
Mm-hmm.
that seems to be the law, whether you're on the right or on the left, I think, in 2026. The
Mm-hmm.
one strike and you're out tactic, which is really what matters with essentialism. If essentialism in this case isn't necessarily talking about that you have a solid ahistorical identity, he's saying that it's become a political tactic in the vampire's castle to ascribe, to make a moralistic judgment and assume that one action proves that you are beyond rehabilitation or redemption. Now, unfortunately, here I see the academy, but I also see almost everything else in the world right now. This tendency to moralize and to discount people and maybe be eager to discard people because you feel you have a reason they've morally misbehaved.
Well, so I think
I
that's
think this is the place where it's really, for me, this is where this critique really includes the academy, but it's far broader.
yeah,
This
I
cultural
don't.
symptom is far broader.
Well, and again, there's a couple reasons that that could be, right? One, we have 13 years
Yeah,
for this to
sure.
expand beyond the academy, right? I don't disagree for a second. I think, again, if you go to that first law, fear that they will be the next one outed, exposed to condemn, this is why that
This
fear
is
is so real.
so real.
It's not the case
Exactly right. Exactly right.
of,
That's a great connection.
man, I said something stupid and now I just kind of keep my mouth shut for the rest of class, but next week I'll come back and it'll be fine. There is a this is this carries with it an intensity or a severity which is significant, right? You get one strike. What's funny to me is the incredible contradiction that exists between the fourth law requiring that we essentialize things, right? That we distill people
Mm-hmm.
down to an action or a comment,
Mm-hmm.
and the second law that says thought and action must be very difficult. At the same time,
Mm-hmm.
that we're going to sit there and posture and say, well, yes, the comment was made, but we must look at it in its context and we must look at it in its, intent. And then we have to look at it from different perspectives, which shift the context. And, this idea that we're going to be deep thinkers and that we're going to be deliberate about what we're doing. And otherwise, we are going to inflate our complexities. At the same
Right.
time, we are looking for that kill shot. And so it is entirely
Yeah.
good to
Yeah.
be thoughtful and deliberate and slow unless we are given that opportunity. And then when we are given that opportunity, we better be absolutely lightning quick, because if we aren't, somebody else is going to beat us to that punch, and they will then be able to be filling the third law, propagating guilt, more effectively than we. And if you can create guilt, then by God, you are doing your job. So to me, again, this is just a wonderful tapestry of early online culture.
Early on culture. Okay. Wonderful. Let's do fifth law, shall we?
Yes.
Fifth law of the vampire castle: think like a liberal,
Because you are one.
And obviously especially in Marxist circles, and even now, what's worse than being a liberal? I mean, not only the right hates you, but the left hates you even more. Right? So that's what he's saying. The VC's work of constantly stoking up reactive outrage consists of endlessly pointing out the screamingly obvious. Capital behaves like capital. It's not very nice. It's repressive. State apparatuses are indeed repressive. We must protest. So that we're always saying, look at capitalism and the gesture of, let me see if I can elaborate. I think there's, just to make sure that we're all on the same page here. I think this is kind of the missing part of the joke. It's all snark, right? But what's the serious point here? Reactive outrage. It isn't outrage at injustices that we're talking about. We're talking about reactive, performative outrage. And reactive outrage, if it becomes automatic, becomes a substitute for thinking, argumenting, and actually argumentation, and actually makes solidarity impossible because you're just in this reactive outrage mode. It's just yeah,
unless we can coalesce around the process of outrage, in which case outrage becomes the vehicle for achieving solidarity. I mean, this is, I have no intention of making this an overly political comment or taking us down a political path here with this, right? Mm-hmm. But, you know, this whole idea, like, think like a liberal because you are a liberal, stoke outrage. This was the master stroke of the right here in America.
Sure.
Around everything. We just need to be outraged
all the time
at so many liberal policies, and it didn't always need, it very rarely at times needed to be rooted in anything other than just the need to be outraged.
Right.
But there was
that's exactly what he's talking about here. I love the fact that you point out that this particular weapon, even though he's diagnosing it as a problem of left-wing online culture in 2013, actually, I think it's fair to say it's something that...
Oh, this fits on either hand.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
As your example shows. We won't go too much in the weeds. We'll try to skirt some of the politics here in order to think about the larger structures of the discourse. But I think your point is very well taken. Shall I go to the conclusion? Then I have then we'll have our final comments.
Pithy as they are.
And we'll keep pith. We'll keep pith in mind.
So this is, you're jumping to the section.
Moment. I'm jumping to the very, very end.
What is to be done?
What is to be done? The hopeful moment.
Yes.
I'm going to say it before I read it, Michael. This is probably not fair, but I think this is... I'm not blaming Fisher for this. I think this is a sign. I think I'm characterizing this as weak. This feels very, speaking of performative, I think this is a performative optimistic gesture. I feel it's very weak. I'm not necessarily criticizing Fisher for that, because I do feel that, right or wrong, this blog post feels very immediate. It feels like it's coming from a real place, an authentic place of outrage, frustration, anger, hurt feelings. So it's coming out of an existentially raw place. So it's not a surprise that when he feels obligated to end with a hopeful, well, we can get over this. Of course we can. And, I don't find his hopeful moment very convincing, but I don't know. Let's read it. Now that I gave you my judgment on it.
Sure.
And you'll tell me what you think. All right. So what do we need to do, Michael? You need to know, right? We all want to know. We need to learn or relearn how to build comradeship and solidarity. Instead of, how do we get out of the vampire castle? How do we exit? That's the name of this essay, right? Exiting.
Together.
We do it. We do it together. And how do we do that? We need to learn or relearn how to build comradeship and solidarity instead of doing capital's work for it by condemning and abusing each other. This doesn't mean, of course, that we must always agree. On the contrary, we must create conditions where disagreement can take place without fear of exclusion and excommunication. That actually is a wonderful, pithy, speaking of pithy, description of what the problem of vampires, of existing within the vampire's castle is.
Agreed.
Is that when you do that, you are, in fact, you're arguing it, but it is the bad thing about existing within the vampire castle is not that you disagree. It's not that you're arguing, but the arguing is a prelude to a kind of mechanical, a priori acts of condemnation and abuse and
Right,
competition,
right.
and alienation. So that's the problem. What's the solution? Solidarity. Okay. Comments? I already sort of gave my comment on it.
Well, I hadn't thought about it this way, but now that I am, right, let me just finish it for a second. We must break out of the debate, the communicative capitalism in which capital is endlessly cajoling us to participate in. And remember that we are involved in a class struggle. The goal is not to be an activist, but to aid the working class to activate and to transform itself. Outside the vampire's castle, anything is possible, right? It's almost as if he's saying, hey, guys, remember, this is what we're here to do. And we just have to get outside the vampire's castle.
Right.
I have two thoughts, right? One, yes, in a way, this kind of sounds like a form ending, right? You write your article, you explicate the problem, and then when you get to the end, you have to propose a solution because you're the smart guy. You came up with the idea here. So now how do we fix it? And his answer is like, hey, let's be together. Let's not, it's okay to disagree, but we can't be, the whole excommunication button. We have to stop pushing that, right?
Demoralism leads to excommunication.
Right. So I think on one hand, what's he supposed to do? Say, hey, this is what's happening. And guys, we are so fully screwed. Thanks for reading. Right. That's one. My question, and it's not much of a question, is his last line. He says, outside the vampire's castle, anything is possible. What's the vampire's castle? This is our online discourse. Barry, can we even get outside the vampire? There is no outside the vampire's castle.
Even in 2013, was that even a, and we're not talking about 2026. We're not talking about the post-pharmacological age. I'm just wondering, did that sentence have that much credence or viability in 2013?
I don't know. I mean, is he outside the vampire's castle? You have to go scorched earth. That's it.
What do you mean? You have to go scorched earth?
You can't get outside the vampire. You can't get outside this. I mean, I'm sorry.
You're thinking of
Jonathan Crary. Part of my inner dialogue just slipped. My inner monologue, just slipped out there.
But we do the episodes together. I know that book. I got you. I'm on your wavelength. Anyway, sorry.
No, that's it. I just it sounds like. And again, I love what he's doing for when he's doing it, and I agree with it. And it looks, I don't want to say, what's the word I want to use here? It looks very familiar to me. I think this is a really good articulation of what it is to be unsure in deep waters, where you genuinely believe what you're talking about matters, but you're not sure that you're deserving of the seat at the table. I mean, this on one hand, when you think about the fact that the man suffered from depression and eventually took his own life, this makes sense, right? These are deep, heady things to be dealing with. So I get it, and it's familiar to the situation he's talking about. At the same time, I think if we're looking at, okay, so what's your solution, bud? Well, you're stuck. You're supposed to provide a solution. I don't know that there is one. I mean, this is it's what do you say? This is what it is. Like that. This is,
maybe what he should have done in hindsight, and I'm not really saying, I'm gonna, what's the word? When I look hypothetical alternative universes, I'm not really going that far, but maybe part of the problem for Mark Fisher and for us was that he was thinking that exiting the vampire castle was the goal. maybe the only goal or maybe the more realistic, pragmatic goal, the one that would have perhaps given him more pleasure, although it would have been much less interesting and compelling rhetorically. But maybe what he and we still need is a way of existing within it and a way of moving within it. And maybe the whole project of exiting it is maybe that's part of the problem. Does that make any sense?
It makes perfect sense, but I think it makes perfect sense in 2026.
Not so much in
In 2023, he's approaching this like, hey, we've just walked into this. This is a thing that we've created. Let's back out and do it differently.
Yeah, and you mean 2013? I
Sorry,
mean,
yes.
long, yeah, but I mean, yeah, and especially then, right? I mean, there's no reason to assume that online culture would take the form it did, right? So there's a kind of utopian hope in here.
Yeah. I mean, I think he got stuck. I don't think you can, like, what other response can he give? What other solution?
I really don't know.
Can he, like, because essentially you get to the end, it's like, hey, it's fine to disagree, but let's be civil. Let's try
Michael.
and unify. I don't think that, I mean, that's
no, that would have been silly. Michael, here's the final question
for
you. And it's related to this. Let's put the pressure on ourselves. I'm sorry, Mark, that I put the pressure on you a moment ago. Forgive me. Let's put the pressure on ourselves. Well, first, I'm going to put the pressure on Dr. Repici.
That's fun.
And then I'm also going to put the pressure on me. All right, Dr. Repici, how would you end this?
In 2000
version of this outside the vampire's castle, anything is possible. Would you use that ending?
In 2013 or in 2000?
No, I'm talking about now. No, I'm jettisoning. I'm not jettisoning.
No, I would not.
I'm accelerating to.
I would not even consider that ending.
Okay.
I think that the best you can do is to maybe reconsider the rules of engagement within the vampire's castle. You know, it's interesting. I'll give you an example of this. Like, if I've taken lately to reading Reddit a lot. Do you do this at all?
Of course.
Okay. And there's sort of a self-leveling to Reddit where some discussions and threads remain focused and civil. And some just devolve into utter snarky chaos. Never necessarily in the way that Twitter does.
Right.
Right. But it's like there's sort of this communal acceptance of what we'll do. That's not outside the vampire's castle. That's just a reconfiguration of the building. And so, you know, I don't know if this is going to probably sound like a bad attempt to be witty. I would rename it and I would reconfigure it. I think that the idea that we're not getting outside of online discourse, that's not happening. And I believe in that so firmly that I said earlier that it has become an aspect of our physical discourses as well. So I wouldn't say outside of it, we have to do this or that or anything's possible. There is no outside anymore. I think you have to sort of reconfigure it. And I think you just have to sort of be patient with the transition, because that's it. All of this stuff is in flux. You know, I do think that we can build better systems for interaction and discourse, which don't necessarily silence, but hey, if nobody wants to hear you, we're going to sort of just move you to a different room. So I like, I never thought this would be a thing. I like Reddit as my answer.
Well, so that's another way of rearranging the furniture in the vampire's castle.
Yeah.
Which I'm not mocking at all, because I think that's my position as well. That I think exiting, I'm going to bracket off the question of whether or not, now there are, and you alluded to it, there are media theorists. Crary's one of them, not the only one by any means. And in a way, our legislature are increasingly in the state house. There are folks who feel that it is possible to do various versions of scorched earth policies on the vampire castle.
Right.
And in terms, maybe people get or are more eager, maybe adults are more eager to get scorched earth on their children's technological habits than they are on their own. But sometimes that happens. People have technology or cell phone fasts or media fasts or online fasts. And of course, increasingly, I mean, I'm sure you're aware of the stories. You can't miss them as an educator where, schools, elementary schools, junior high, there are some classrooms where we're just saying, nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
No cell phone, no AI, everything is going to be paper, everything is going to be analog. So there are versions of scorched earth. There are contemporary scorched earth strategies toward the vampire's castle. But that's not what I think. That's another discussion. I think in terms of this particular discussion and considering the vampire's castle and the discursive community in there, I think there is a scorched earth discussion, but I like your discussion I like your point about changing rules of engagement. It strikes me as maybe the more moderate solution is something that would be helpful here.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I feel like this will be my happy feel good moment here, right? I feel like that these structures are going to evolve as they do. And ultimately, profit is going to dictate how they evolve. And you can call me cynical, whatever, it's fine. I do think that there's a social appetite for nastiness and snark that is, I think it is finite. I think at a certain point, the pendulum will swing, and then the modes of profiting will swing with them. I think that we got to be careful to remember that we're not so deeply and fully steeped in internet culture, historically, that we can say this is necessarily the way it'll be. I mean, I wouldn't consider myself an optimist in this regard, but I do think that there is still plenty of room to swing back towards a more decent or more tolerant version of disagreement. And if I'm right, then this will stop and we'll have comments that don't start with "you're a dick,"
which is the first comment that we have,
and the second,
yes, and also the second in the post for poor Mark Fisher's blog post. Anyway, comments on the blog post. Well, Michael, I certainly can't top your eloquent words in your last comment, so I'm going to bow out here and just bid you a very nice evening, and thank you again for everything.
Yeah, Barry, this was a good one to talk about. I enjoyed it. Thank you, and you and your shirt have a good evening as well.
All right, thank you. We'll try our best. Take care.
Bye.